So we've been looking at Thomas Wolsey, and what we're going to move on to today is we're going to examine the fall of Thomas Wolsey. So Wolsey was allowed freedom in particular areas with regards to the courts, with regards to the church. He had an awful lot of power, but he only had power over areas where Henry would allow him to have those powers. And this debate about whether Wolsey was master or servant, we very much see the servant argument come to the fore when we look at the downfall of Thomas Wolsey. So this image of Thomas Wolsey running the show is one which we should take with a pinch of salt. We shouldn't follow it exactly. The relationship, as I say, was always one of master and servant. So this idea that Thomas Wolsey ran the show pretty much from 1513 to 1528/29 is perhaps overly simplistic. So by 1529 there were reasons why Henry VIII could feel a little bit frustrated with Thomas Wolsey. Firstly, Henry's overall ambition, as we've seen, was to be crowned King of France. That was very much an unfulfilled ambition by the late 1520s. It looked further away than it had ever been in the past, and in fact Henry was in an alliance with the French after the diplomatic U-turn, which meant that it was not really going to happen. And it was also unpopular, that alliance with the French, who were England's traditional enemy. There was the embarrassment of the amicable grant in 1525, which was really Henry's idea, but Wolsey's inability to get that cash, which could have launched that invasion, which came at a time when Henry had his best chance of being King of France. That played a part in Wolsey's downfall. It shows us that Wolsey rose to prominence at a time, and because he could do what the king wanted him to do. The amicable grant showed that Wolsey couldn't always achieve what the king wanted him to achieve. Importantly, the king's failure to gain that annulment from his marriage from Catherine of Aragon. Wolsey was a papal legate. This was very handy for Henry. It gave Henry a man on the inside with regards to church issues. Henry wanted Wolsey to get the annulment from Catherine of Aragon. Wolsey failed to achieve that. So it's really this failure to get that annulment, the King's Great Matter, as it is known as, which plays a major part and certainly determines the timing of Wolsey's downfall. So we're going to look at now the King's Great Matter. So the King's Great Matter. So in Europe at the time there was opposition to the Catholic Church, which we've looked at, which we've examined briefly. There was growth of humanism, which emerges from Erasmus, but with Thomas More, the sort of leading English humanist. Protestant churches were established in parts of Germany. They were established in Switzerland and Scandinavia, based on the writings of Martin Luther. And there were reasons for a reformation within the English Church. The English Church was, according to some writers, some historians, it was in decay. And the King's Great Matter brings about this breakdown in the relationship between Henry VIII and the Pope. So what this dispute was really over was the fact that the Pope would not declare Henry VIII's marriage from Catherine of Aragon as null and void. So Henry came up with the master plan, but he wanted Wolsey to enact it. And Henry's master plan came from the Bible. He was flicking through the Bible and he came across Leviticus. And what Leviticus stated was that it was unlawful for a man to marry his brother's wife. And if they did marry, that marriage would be childless. Henry felt that he was childless. He did have a daughter, Mary of course, but as far as Henry was concerned, that was as good as childless. The fact that Catherine, and she was blamed by Henry, hadn't provided him with a male heir was evidence that Leviticus was ringing true in his own life. The problem with the Leviticus argument is that within the Bible, the book of Leviticus is contradicted by the book of Deuteronomy. So the book of Deuteronomy said that it was a brother's duty to marry a deceased brother's wife so that he could have the children which were denied his brother. So the religious argument was on pretty shaky foundations right from the very beginning. So there are a number of historical interpretations about how central the divorce was in the English Reformation, in the eventual break from Rome, which is what the King's Matter is leading to. So A.G. Dickens, great historian, argued that the divorce was not crucial. So he believed that reforming ideas were spreading across Europe at the time, and they were gaining favour in England, particularly in urban areas, particularly in the southeast, in the capital London, where there were a lot of foreigners coming and going as a sort of main trading area. The reasons for this are that the church was clearly corrupt, and we've looked at some of these issues, but certainly the sort of pomp and power of Thomas Wolsey intensified these negative feelings that many people had towards the Catholic Church. So what Dickens is arguing is that Henry's divorce determined the timing of the Reformation, but not the reasons why the Reformation happened. It was one of many contributing factors. So G.R. Elton, great Geoffrey Elton, he argues that the Reformation was an act of state. It was caused by and it was influenced by the king and his servants. So here the divorce is the catalyst for change. What Elton is arguing is that the king had rejected, he'd ignored a number of reforming ideas which had emerged and come to prominence in the 1520s. What changed was that he started to support these ideas because he wanted to take full control of the state himself. So Thomas Cromwell becomes an important actor as he emerges as the king's chief minister after the fall of Thomas Wolsey. So there are a number of revisionist arguments, so people like Christopher Hay, and they challenged the idea that reformist ideas were actually popular in the 1520s. So they see the church as well respected in the early part of Henry VIII's reign. They see Wolsey as a prudent first minister or chief minister. So for these revisionist historians, the divorce is absolutely central to the Reformation and to the break with Rome. So they believe that what happens is the king ruthlessly makes use of the reformers and all of their reforming ideas because he wants the divorce. How Wolsey fits into all of this is Thomas Wolsey is the man who Henry leans on to get this divorce to get this annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. His inability to do so is what brings about his downfall.